welcome to our third talk, Mastermind talk on practical conversations on the challenges of COVID-19. And today we're going to be speaking about how can you claim the gift hidden in the crisis. And the idea of these conversations came from a wonderful mastermind group that's been meeting for quite a number of years. And you're going to, in a moment, meet the people that are involved in that. I'm one of them. I'm Leeza Steindorf. And we have some very rich conversations. And when the crisis came, when people had lockdown, we started discussing things. We thought, you know, it'd be really wonderful if some of the rich conversations we have, that we could share those with others and include others in order to help one another travel through this in a really impactful way and help ourselves, our families, and also our businesses with some really effective tools. And so that was the birth of this. That's what we'll be doing together today. And yeah, so I'd like to start out by having a few people introduce themselves. I'm going to go around on my screen. Gary, if I could ask you to perhaps begin.
Certainly, been in the mastermind from day one. I live in Australia. That's where I'm Melbourne. It's 9 o'clock in the morning here. My background is financial markets. So I've been running a business for 25 years, helping our clients outperform the stock market in 401ks and other alternative mutual funds, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the risk and the skills that come from working in a continuously uncertain environment. Is just degrees of uncertainty, I believe, prepares you for skills in other parts of your life.
Thanks, Gary. Teresa?
Yeah, so I'm Teresa Nicasio. I'm up here in Vancouver, Canada, and I'm a psychologist, and I do some other things as a wellness person. I write columns, I have a radio show, I do speaking, but mostly I'm passionate about patient empowerment and information. Information is power, so the more we can do that, then the more we can help elevate each other. So welcome, everyone.
Thanks, Teresa. Luke?
Bonjour, my name is Luc Goulet. I'm from Quebec, Canada. I'm a businessman from always. I started in the retail business, had a chain of kids' shoe stores. Now I'm into the real estate market. And I wrote 2 books, one about social wellness and one about personal empowerment. I'm a lover of life. I've got a beautiful wife, 2 kids, and we're just enjoying the fact that we can communicate with you guys some good ideas, and let's all grow together with this.
Luke. Dusty?
Dusty Staub. I've been running a business for about 30 years called Staub Leadership International. And our whole purpose is about liberating purpose, passion, and power individuals, teams, and organizations. And crisis centers in my youth, marital and family therapist. I've written about 4 books and 200 articles now, all around personal growth, leadership, team effectiveness. And for me, this mastermind has been delightful, being with the other 4 individuals in it now for 3 years. And I always walk away from our mastermind calls feeling uplifted and really grateful.
Thanks, Dusty. Yeah, as said, I'm Leeza Steindorf, and I have the pleasure of being with these people also every other week, and we've been doing that for quite some time. I am a life coach. I'm an executive coach, also speaker. One thing we all have in common is that we are all authors. I have authored 2 books, one on peace education in German and one on parenting here in America or in English. And I also do crisis and conflict and communication trainings and transformation. And I work as a mediator as well. So it's, for me, a really wonderful opportunity to have these conversations with you all and with my colleagues here to help people find ways to be more at ease, especially when things get heated or go south, and how we can draw on our own tools, our own skills, but also the ones that we have collectively, that we can share those with one another. So the way that we're going to be doing it today is that each one of the folks in the mastermind will have an opportunity to answer the question of the day. And then it'll be open up to conversation. And also at the end of, after everyone has shared, all 5 individuals, then we'll just open it up for questions. You have at the bottom of your screen your chat box. I invite you to please use that. If thoughts come up or while someone's talking, you want to capture a question, please go ahead and do it there so that we don't lose anything. And Dusty's going to be our timekeeper, so if you see him lifting things, it's just that we know where we're at in our time, and so we stay on track. Okay. All right then. So let's go ahead and jump in. I think I'll go in the same direction. Gary, if I can ask you to begin. The question being, how can you claim the gift hidden in this crisis? Oh, you're muted. There you go.
Sorry about that. There are three points to make there. One is the word claim means an action that you should take. So that's a doing word. The other is the gift. The gift, not just in this crisis, but also your gifts as well, generally in just normal times. And I think the way I'd like to position this is that what we think our gifts are sometimes, most of the time, is not what other people see our gifts to be. And something that I found that has worked well in the past with me is actually to ask other people what they think your gifts are, and in various aspects of your life. Business, so what you should do is go to between 5 or 10 people. So you want to go to friends, colleagues, and people that you don't know that well, maybe somebody you know at the club or something like that, that you feel close enough to be able to ask them the question, and ask them to tell you how you add value to them in the way that they know you. And obviously there's going to be some bias in that because people only know you for certain things and how they interact with you. And you can even go to customers if you feel people that have been customers for a long time, obviously they'll be seeing you through that prism, but that gives you something to see how the world perceives you. So that's just general gifts, and you'll be amazed at what comes back at you. I think sometimes we are either too humble or we are too egotistical about how we perceive our gifts to be. And so that's one way of filtering how the world sees you. And then to do that within a crisis. So to find out in times of adversity is where our true colors shine through. And that is when probably the gift would come through the most. So to claim your gift, ask others how they perceive you in this environment and what you've done for them and how you've added value. And sometimes how you think you may like to think you would have added value, you haven't, and also vice versa, you would have when you thought you wouldn't have.
Great.
Very good.
Comments, questions on that?
I love Gary, your invitation to ask other people what they see as a way of getting that reflection back. I think that's very profound.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I ditto that. In particular, I think a lot of times that which is our greatest gift, we are blind to because we assume that it's nothing. We just assume that everybody can do it, but it's actually really a huge gift. And many people don't realize their value. And I see a lot of depression and anxiety that comes out of that when people don't realize it. So by asking people is a great way to resource. It's a great strategy for resourcing folks and getting more clarity that they do have value and in what ways they do and are touching other people's lives.
I think you've hit the nail on the head. You've hit the nail on the head there, Teresa, is that we don't realize what our greatest gift is most of the time, and we just take it for granted because we think everybody can do it. Yeah.
Yes, and one trick that I may want to suggest is also you can, like Gary mentioned, you can ask people what gifts you have, but you can tell people even if they don't ask you what gifts you see in them, what are their value, and without them asking, just to give it freely. I do that often with my friends, they have different gifts than I do, and I tell them, I repeat them, I really appreciate you for who you are and for your gifts that you provide as well.
I find it interesting the take that you had on that question. I had a different take, which will be interesting when we get around the circle. But there's a flip side to that as well, and that is the things that you may perceive as your weaknesses or things that you don't feel are contributions that they can be. So for example, with myself, I was in a conversation a while back, and I'm very direct. If it occurs to me, I say it, it's right out there in the front. And I always think, oh gosh, how can I filter that or be less of that? And the feedback I got from the group was, oh my God, that's the best thing about you. We always know exactly what you're thinking, and it's so clear because then we get a clear reflection. And here I was thinking, wow, that's really, that's something I have to change, or it's not a contribution. So you can be also very surprised that the things that you don't think are contributions really can be. Yeah. Any other questions or comments for Gary? Welcome. We have Seth, Sarah arrived, Patsy, Allison. Nice to have you all.
Seth showed up also.
Yep.
Yes. Thank you for joining.
Yeah, welcome all of you.
So we still have plenty of time on this discussion. We're only at 2 minutes and 41 seconds. So
Well, then I can add further to it then, Dusty.
Yeah.
I think the area then for you, so what do you do next? So when you get that feedback, what do you do? Right. And I think it requires a bit of reflection and maybe a bit of soul searching on your part, because I can guarantee you the answers that you get are not going to be totally in sync with the way that you view the world through your eyes. And so you have to be honest with yourself. You have to be honest with the feedback. And you can, if you want to get into discussion with people, I found that hasn't been as fruitful as just taking their feedback at face value for what they give you. And then with, in terms of crisis, which is what we're in now, times of adversity is where we probably the feedback you get would probably be more valuable than just in normal times. Because as we all know, it's during times of adversity that we grow the most. We want our true value, to come through in the times of adversity. That's when we want to be able to shine and help as much as we can, if we have an others-centered mindset rather than a self-centered mindset. So times of adversity, crisis is the time to ask the questions, definitely.
I'd like to add to that also, that when you get that feedback, to not judge it, to not make yourself wrong, to not see it through a particular filter, but really to look at the facts of what you're hearing from these people, understand it's their perspective, and take from that the fruit, the juice for yourself that you can really use to serve yourself and others.
And that bit that I think is key is the concept of thinking about the gift as a service. It's like a gifting, the verb of gifting then. And when we serve others, when we're altruistic from a psychological emotional basis, we have all kinds of goodies we get out of that. We get some dopamine hits, we get those endorphins, and we actually get a lot out of giving. So to not hold back on who we are and who, the gifts that each of us has, to share them generously is a service. And that's, I think oftentimes we overlook that, just the same as the bit of overlooking what our gifts actually are.
And one gift that I see that we all have is that we're unique. So we all bring something unique to the table, and people can recognize that. As much as you recognize what people bring for you, they do the same from you. So the beauty that we all are unique and different brings us as a society a whole, a great whole.
Time.
Okay, well, let's then turn now to Teresa, Dr. Teresa Nicasio. How can you claim the gift hidden in this crisis, Teresa?
Well, I think the first error is that it actually isn't. There's so many gifts that it's actually pretty amazing how many gifts are in this crisis. I want to preface it with, obviously, that I have a lot of loved ones who have lost loved ones from this crisis, so I don't want to overlook that. But looking at the elements of what this has done, just prior to this COVID crisis, we had Greta Thunberg, who really likes climbing on the mountaintops and saying, hey, we've got all this problem, and people would just say, yeah. And yeah, we need to reduce these, but we didn't feel empowered and truly have a sense of hope that we could turn this boat around. And I think that gift of knowing that we can turn it around, and through changing habits, then starting from the inside, it's really powerful. And I want to just read a poem that you've probably all seen, but just as a reminder that I feel like I don't need to reinvent the wheel. I love this poem by Kitty O'Meara called In the Time of Pandemic. And I'd like to share it because I feel like she says a lot of things, and that a lot are actually relevant, as you know, in the psychological, emotional realm. And the people stayed home, and they listened, and read books, and rested, and exercised, and made art, and played games, and learned new ways of being, and were still. And they listened more deeply. Some meditated, some prayed, some danced, some met their shadows, and the people began to think differently. And they listened more deeply, and the people healed. And in the absence of people living in ignorant, dangerous, and heartless ways, the earth began to heal. And when the danger passed and the people joined together again, they grieved their losses and made new choices and dreamed new images and created new ways to live and heal the earth fully as they had been healed. And I feel like that really captures a big part of it, and it captures that bit of part of the gift is that we now have a new dream, that our skies are more clear. The you know, in terms of climate, that we see that it is possible if we work together as a global community. And that was something I think that we've had very much a self-centered focus, and this is now shifting to the we and the us, and in particular the gift for our future generations, for our kids and grandkids and great-grandkids, that now they have more of a chance for a life and a planet that they can reside on. So that's, for me, the captures the biggest gifts.
Great. Now for the 5 minutes of discussion.
So again, I want to encourage you all to use the chat box if you have anything to share on that, or just capture ideas or questions as we move along. Teresa, as you read that, and I'd heard that there were different authors on that, and I don't know exactly where it's from, but the one that I was first sent was in Italian. And it comes to mind, a friend of mine sent me a photo, and I don't know if you all are familiar with the Italian streets, like they're really narrow little streets, right? And then there's tons of people and cars and mopeds and all these things rushing through there. And when the quarantine started, he sent me these photos that everything was completely dead, like there was nothing. And it was probably, for me, the most dramatic impression I've had, because you drive around here sometimes and there are no cars on the street, but like in the middle of downtown Rome where there's nothing. And so that change made it that picture made the change very visible to me, and the opportunities that were involved in it. And then people started opening their windows and singing to one another, from open windows, because again, they have that close proximity in those small old European towns. So yeah, I had those visuals and the memories of all the actual things that are changing in a very real way, how people are reaching out and gardening and turning within during this time. Yeah. Franny said the gift is in the silence.
Yeah. I love, Teresa, I love the part about the really deeper listening aspect of that. And the poem really does a nice job of saying, here's what's available. Here's what can be done at a deeper level of healing from a non-ordinary state of the world at the moment.
Or what feels not ordinary. What may actually become, a lot of people use the term, this is the new normal, and trying to get used to the new normal. And as we've talked about in some of the other groups here, it takes about 30 days to even just get used to a new way. And it takes about 3 to 4 months to start to settle in. I think we're getting close to that mark. And it really is a gift, because on our own, we didn't have the self-control to stop flying so many flights, to stop driving so much, to just stop and be still, and also to be more grateful for the moments of connection. And that's been a huge gift. I think we've taken people, as our whole peoples, we've taken each other for granted, but now it's like we can't even take for granted that we can give each other a hug, that whenever we want to. I mean, that's pretty big. So when we can hug, it's just like, I want to drink this deliciousness up, I just want to relish in it. And I think that that's an important gift.
Yeah, Teresa and I were talking as the Italians in the group. It's like, oh my God, you can't touch each other? What are you talking about? Franny brings up a good question of, define normal. And I would also pose the question of, what if we don't go back to any normal? What if the idea of normal is no longer?
Mm-hmm.
And we remain in a place of creation and recreation? How could we find our stability and our beauty and our goodness within that, instead of trying to settle into something that's, hunkered down, and that's not gotten us very far in the past, at least not where we were hunkered down in.
And
What
while
I
we're trying,
see, oh, yes, Gary, you can go ahead.
I was just going to say, while we're trying to discover, we're going through a discovery period of what the new normal is be careful not to look forward, because people look forward and create notions and perceptions of what may be. And being human beings, that is more often a negative rather than a positive. And then we start living according to something that may never be, and we worry about things that may never be. So the more we can stay in the now moment and in the near present and react to things as they unfold, rather than take this henny penny, the sky's going to fall on my head, doomsday, 6 months out, which has been a lot of going on around. We just got to adapt and react as things go, and create that normal, discover it as we go, and embrace that process, rather than henny penny, the sky's going to fall on my head and everything's going to be bad and never doomsday stuff that's been around for so many years now. So let's just stay close to the present, live the present, take a near future outlook, adapt as we go, and play it out that way. Because you know what, there's going to be just as much good stuff happens as bad stuff, but we don't factor in the good stuff. We only factor in the bad stuff when we look forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'd just like to talk about what's normal. We have to understand that normal now, or before the crisis, our normal was not the same normal as our parents, for example.
Yeah.
Generations, there's always a new reality, a new normal. It's just that now it has changed so much, so drastically, rapidly, but we'll regain a new normal in the now, and it will evolve and become the new normal. So the normal is in constant motion. It's just faster these days.
Mm-hmm.
Luke,
I'm going to give you the opportunity to just continue. How can you claim the gift hidden in this crisis?
Well, the speeches from my colleagues were really good. It connected with some of the things I wanted to say. In times of crisis, we often see the best in us shine through. Also, we see the worst of us, but in the vast majority, we see the best of us shine through. And the one gift that I like to focus on today is the personal and social resilience. How we've been able, all of us, all of humanity, to turn on a dime on a personal level and on a social level. So if we look at the personal level, most people are doing what we're supposed to do, the sacrifices, staying away from each other, washing their hands, and all the stuff that we need to do. We do it for two reasons: to protect ourselves, but also to protect others. So there's the me and the we with this incredible connection. I see healthcare workers working so hard, going out of their way, doing unhuman stuff almost, just to maintain the security and helping people who are sick. So we're going beyond the comfort zone, and that's something that we all can value, our resilience. As a society, we see the science community not working in silo and try to compete with one another. They're working globally together to find a solution to this health crisis. I see organizations, I see companies joining hands and helping those in need. I don't know about your country or your province or state, but here in Quebec, there's a lot of people with no jobs, no income, but there's always somewhere where they can find food. And all of the companies, the grocery stores have joined forces. So I see this resilience shine through always. I see how we turn on a dime and try to produce stuff that was made in China, for example, the masks, the oxygen machines, and all of that. Now they produce them locally, and we're starting to distribute locally. So this is the message that I have, is that we're in a species that is incredibly resilient, and we're still there, And with the new normal, we'll still be there, we'll adapt, and we constantly can do it together. So the we and the me is interconnected more so than ever.
Okay, time,
Am I good with time?
You
time,
know,
time to move to discussion.
All right.
Luke, on that point, when you talk about resilience, I was thinking about, first of all, I think of the immune system, which unfortunately I don't think anybody's really talking about in a big way here, that the way that how do we strengthen our immune system? And by staying away from individuals, what we're trying to do is stay away naturally from individuals whose immune systems aren't strong enough to deal with the virus should they get it. And that makes total sense. However, nobody's really paying attention to what about our own immune system? What are we doing to strengthen ourselves physically, nutrition-wise, exercise, positive thinking, plenty of clean water, all of those things that we need to keep a strong immune system that allows us to be resilient. But also on an emotional level, if we think about, everybody in the call, I think is over 20, probably, right? So, if you're anywhere over 20, you've had challenges. I mean, that's just part of the human existence on our planet. And that's how we build resilience, right? If things are, it's kind of like the boy in the bubble who was never exposed to germs, he never could build that resistance. And so the challenges that we've had is what helps us build our resilience. And now culturally, globally, what we're facing together in these challenges is exactly what is building our resilience.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm going to be a little bit of a fly in the ointment here. I just had Dr. Stephanie Seneff on my show again, and talking about the whole immune elements. And another gift that I'm hoping comes out of this whole pandemic is the awareness of what we've been doing, the experiment we've been doing of putting poison on our food, putting poison on our soil, putting poison in our air and water. There's some very negative effects, and in terms of the immune system, and the way I'm not going to get into all the science of it, but the nutrients that get absorbed or that are able to transfer, the neurotransmitters that get produced or not, because the glyphosate disrupts the shikimate pathway, so we can't even get our neurotransmitters or have a lot of the our B vitamins and a lot of the things that need to be transported through our body, that it makes it harder for the immune system. So this is part of why it's been such a big deal, but it's a wake-up call that maybe we do things differently, that we start to eat more clean. I think more and more people, then it's like, let's grow our own food organically, and let's share seeds, and feed that whole food revolution that Ocean Robbins and several other people are talking a lot about.
And also what we're doing for our pleasure. So there was a farm stand close by, and it's not yet strawberry season here, but in Northern California it is. So they had a farm stand. I was like, oh, awesome, fresh strawberries. We used to go pick ours when we lived in Europe. So they looked beautiful. I was like, great, I'll take a flat. $15 for, I don't know how many, there were 6 little, those containers in there. I got them home. They taste like nothing. Mm-hmm. And I mean, literally nothing. I couldn't even get a real flavor of strawberry out of the thing. And so I can take them. I don't even want to put them in anything. And of course, strawberries do absorb an inordinate amount of pesticides. They're one of the fruits and vegetables that take a lot on. But I was amazed, and I think how many of the foods that we are eating, we don't even know what they taste like in their original form, right?
Yeah. So the regenerative agriculture, this is the time for it to step up, and for all of us to support more of the local farmers who are doing things clean, and to, again, put things in our own garden. And I know Dusty, you and your beautiful wife do a lot of gardening, and yeah, doing more of that. I do too. It's a source of joy as well.
I wonder where I'm sorry.
We've got 1 minute left. I was going to say, it's my beautiful wife who does all the gardening. I occasionally help, and I enjoy eating the wonderful things that she grows. So I'll give full credit there.
It's a good team. She grows it and you eat it. It's a good, that works. I want to read, so we've got a couple comments here. So Franny said, as a yoga practitioner for 35 years and a yoga teacher for 25, this is the walk we talk, being in the moment and present. That's what we were speaking of earlier. And then Sherry, who is a retired teacher and an advocate for teachers. As a retiree who is also a caregiver, before March, I felt more isolated than I do now. My kids, my family, and friends were all so busy, and I'm kind of confined to my home to take care of Lloyd. through Zoom, the yard visits, the movies on a patio with family, I'm communicating with more people now. That is great. That's great.
That's beautiful.
I'm
Tom?
noticing that the community is coming together way more, and yeah,
Right?
the neighborhood, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Point.
Okay. So Dusty, we will come to you. How can you claim the gift hidden in this crisis?
Well, for me, it's a perfect lead-in to what I was thinking. So I've been thinking this week about what's the gift. And I think it goes to what Sherry is saying. It also goes to what Fran is saying, that I think people are having to be more present and taking more time to connect. So for me, the gift in this has been stepping out into non-ordinary reality. It's a chance to pause and reflect and maybe reconnect with our hearts more. I do believe, and I've believed this for decades now, that the heart is the integrative center of our age, and that we have been brain dominated and our brains are killing us and the planet. We've got to come back to the wisdom of the heart, which is about connectivity. It's about the greater good. It's the space of compassion and caring. And the way to claim that gift more deeply is, as things open up and people start moving back out there, don't step back into the old way. It's really more of what Fran was saying. It's the way of yoga. It's also the way of Aikido. It's the way of anybody who wants to be really mindful. You listen to your heart, inform your head, and then move forward. So a very powerful technique for me is, what is my heart really trying to tell me? And the heart's voice is quiet. It's still. If we're really busy in our heads and we're running really quickly, we don't hear it. And we get so fast, so quick. There's so much going on. We miss the connections. My sister died in a house fire a number of years ago. She was 2 years younger than me. And for the first year, it was like a curse. I felt guilty. If I'd called her, if I'd talked to her more, maybe she'd still be alive. I was the oldest. I always looked after her and the other four younger than her. And then I realized there was a gift. And the gift was the love that she shared, who she was, and that my sharing my love for her and the love that she had given out so freely and coming from that space. So it was slowing down to connect, to really listen to what my heart was trying to tell me and giving myself that gift. And I think if we do that, we're going to walk in a new way. We're going to eat in a new way. We're going to relate in a new way. And my time's up.
Nice. I love what you're saying about the heart. And years ago, of course, I was in a 3-year program, a spiritual kind of program and such, but we were taught to, think about the heart as a lotus and having 12 petals, and to think about each of those petals as representing our most sacred and most deeply valued values, what matters the most to us. And that was a really powerful exercise. But even but even giving more credibility to the heart from a scientific perspective, which I find is very amazing because it was an energy kind of program, is learning that the heart, the energy that comes from the heart is 10,000. When I heard 10, I thought, well, 10 times more. No, 10,000 times more powerful than the energy that's emitted and detectable by the instruments that physicists do, than the brain. And so that it may be quiet, Dusty, but it's home. I think of it as the heart is our home, and taking care of that heart and taking care of that home and each other's homes is one of the greatest sacred practice we can ever do.
Teresa, what I've heard is that physicists have been able to pick up the electromagnetic resonance of the heart within a 10-foot circumference around the person. But to pick up the pulse of the brain, you have to put an electrode right on the skull to pick it up. So it doesn't get beyond the skull, whereas the heart interacts energetically within a 10-foot circumference with everybody else. And the heart has its own nervous system and its own intelligence that is pumped out with every beat of our heart.
There's a institute called Heart Math. I don't know if you all are familiar with it. It's a wonderful institute, and I love, Teresa, the way that you spoke about the heart as home. And from my understanding, actually it was through military research that they are able to measure the vibration, the electromagnetic impulse of the heart up to actually 5 miles of one human heart. But here's the
Wow.
interesting thing about that. The only reason they can go to 5 miles is because that's as far as their own machinery goes.
No way.
So that
That gives me
doesn't,
shivers.
that's not an indicator of how far that goes. And so if we really think about, let's just consider for fun, why not, that there is no limit, right? And so that, you know, Gary, you over there in Melbourne, that I can have a heart feeling, and, you know, at this moment I'm feeling it, Gary can be over there receiving that without us having any kind of physical, you know, or Zoom, you know, virtual connection. And so if that's the case, then what does that mean about our global existence with everybody together, right? And what are we contributing to by up-leveling our own home experience?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've
It's
done.
also been, oh, yes, Gary.
You go this time, Luke.
Well, there's something I read about the impact of joined hearts who come together, they meditate, and they're in a city, and while they do that, they can bring crime is down, and the bad energy is down. So this strength that we have, and your speeches are so correct. I did a bit of research for my second book where I talk about magnetism, and the heart produces so much more than the brain. So I think we're getting in a new era of this consciousness of the heart. And this is part of the resilience that I was talking about, is we're shifting to a new level. And I find it fascinating.
Yeah,
I want to recommend to everybody a book by Dr. Paul Pearsall called The Heart's Code. And he talks about the intelligence and the information encoded in the heart. He's a psychologist who works with cardiac surgeons who do heart transplants. And so at The Heart's Code, Dr. Paul Pearsall, Pearsal, I think you would really enjoy it. Just want to recommend that to everybody.
yeah. And Gary, you were going to say something earlier.
Yeah, I was going to say 2 quick things. One is I remember I did the heart math stuff and read their material. And the one thing I remember, takeaway I got out of it, Leeza, is that the heart actually has a brain. It remembers. So our brain isn't the only brain that we have in our body.
Right.
And the other thing, just a practical thing to think about in this time as well, is I'm sure all of us will have experienced, and this might be the heart speaking, and this might be a way of listening to the heart, things that we feel we should have done in this time of lockdown that we haven't. Just consider the 1 or 2 things that, you know, wherever it's come from, it's the 1 or 2 things you feel you should have done more that you haven't done. And I believe that's our heart speaking to us.
That's our time. And it's ready to move to Leeza.
Okay, thank you. So I would like to actually share something with you all. What the gift I find in this crisis and what we've been going through is, let me see, aha, can you all see that?
Technology.
So this, what I see as the life that we had prior to this, is around the hand. It's those mountains in the background that were out of focus. It's how we were living, you know, bustling through, getting on airplanes, not taking time for one another, for our health of ourselves or the planet or so forth. So the gift that I find this crisis has given us is this kind of focus. It has put a light and an attention on what is right in front of us, that we had been so good at blending out, having non-focus and not looking at. And so the virus has given us the opportunity, our reactions to it has given us the opportunity to look at really with clarity about what's right in front of us. Now, that could also appear as a burden if one were to judge what one sees. So the invitation that I would have is to look at the various areas of your life, of life in general, and maybe starting outward, coming inward, because that's often easier to look at what is going on in the world. What do I see that's happening, like right now in this crisis? What is, what has changed? What is impacting me, whether it's politics or health or logistics? And separating those facts from how I feel about it. So really disentangling, and through this whole thing, and then looking at, okay, and so what about in my business? You know, what is happening in my business as a result of this? I personally, like, my income went from this to nothing. Like, okay, now what do we do with that? Like, that's a fact. It's not something that I can change overnight, but that's a fact. And then to say, okay, so how do I feel about that? What's my personal involvement in that? But to be able to peel those two apart from one another. The same thing with your finances and your relationships. How has this impacted relationships? I think that what's happened is then things are right in front of somebody. They're like, wow, you know, that's been there. I just haven't seen it. And then coming to yourself and looking at, okay, so what's up for me here in this situation with how do I take care of myself? How are my relationships? How am I in those situations? And then again, separate out from what I'm looking at and my experience of it, and then process whatever's present for us.
Time for open discussion for the mastermind group.
Yeah. And something I think that you were saying, Sherry, is about the power of silence and the sacred pause, and what you're describing, Leeza, with that beautiful picture. You know, so much can come forward. I mean, as I was looking at the picture, I saw like this hippo. The mountain was a hippo. I could see a hippo head, and we start to see things differently and with more clarity than when it's that big blur. And so, Sherry, you know, I think that you're bang on with that notion that you're describing about the power of silence, the power of quieting down. But yeah, it's a beautiful thing. Yeah.
You know, and one of the things that there's a creativity guru out in the West Coast in Silicon Valley named Roger Van Ock, and he wrote 2 books. One's called A Kick in the Seat of the Pants, and the other's called A Whack on the Side of the Head. The whole concept is we have to get whacked out of our rutted way of thinking. And so I think with the COVID crisis it is that kick in the seat of the pants, that whack alongside the head, that helps us shift out of our head, maybe back to our heart, to listen and learn at a deeper level. So I think that's also part of that gift, is getting out of the old rutted way of thinking and seeing things in a new way.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's something that had came up in my psychologist circles as well, and I've noticed it in my own family. We have, one of our daughters has significant ADHD, and there's a lot of children who with ADHD. Now, some are ending up in the hospital because their families are freaking out during this whole thing. But what many of us are finding, and we're finding in our own home, is how much more at peace and how much more joy our daughter is demonstrating, not having the regular stressors of, you know, I think Sherry or Franny, whoever was talking about school, you know, in the school system and all of that. There's this sense of freedom and levity, and it's just incredible to witness that joy that's coming out of this silence, coming out of this beautiful pause. The pause just posts the smack in the head. That's pretty funny.
Do we?
Franny and Sherry have both talked about silence. So, Gary?
I was going to say focus is one of the key things. You know, so often we get caught up in periphery stuff that is it's not even relevant to what we're doing, and you know, we find it difficult to say no quite often, and we're pulled into things that are just not part of our focus, or the focus that we should have on others. And so just saying no in this time, we haven't had to say no because there haven't been those pressures on us to spend time and energy on things that we probably shouldn't. So focus, absolutely. And you know, it's during this time when you haven't had all those things pulling you left, right, and center. What have you spent your time on? Typically, they've been the things that have been important to you. So they've been obviously the people close to you. So from a people perspective, and certainly from an action perspective, what are you spending your time doing on your work activity? And they tend to zoom into the focus, the key areas. So listen to that as well. And you know, beyond this time, stay focused.
Yeah, I love that.
The word that comes to mind for me is integration.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That we don't want to isolate any of those pieces, but that we want to integrate. And I'll share quite honestly, I have so struggled with this whole term of social distancing and isolation. It's just, for me, it's so antithemic to connection and being human, which is what I mean, everything I do is about connection. And so I will talk about physical distancing, but this heart that you're speaking about, that we've all been speaking about, what we're doing here, this is what we crave as human beings. I mean, if we can do it physically, like, all the better, right? But but to come from that place within ourselves and to speak to or connect with that place in another person, even if they're not even operating from that place, that resonance that you were just mentioning, that's what we feel. And that's what actually invites others to go to that place or come from that place within themselves as well.
Yeah, and it reminds me of a song that you're talking about, this your experiences with the leaders, and it's one that came out of some of the shamanic training and such that I went through, and some of you may know this. I know some of you have studied this, but may the heart of earth and the heart of heaven meet in my heart, meet in my heart, and may your heart and my heart be as one, be as one.
I think we've just seen a gift.
So for me that song, it feels like it's another one of my invitations home, and in my work with my clients, whether I sing it out loud or just sing it in my own heart, it's ever present, and I feel that from you as you speak, that you really felt that.
I'm listening to all of this. What I'm struck by, and I really love, working in corporations and with nonprofits and so forth, people have business personas, and traditionally the idea was that we have to separate that out, right? Like we put on our suit and then we go to work, and then we have our professional self. And especially where I spent so much time in Northern Europe, it was really an extreme there. Like you didn't have any bleed over. It's different in North America. But nonetheless, there's still this perspective that we have this separation of ourselves. And what I'm hearing in this group, but also sensing around me in a lot of the conversations amidst all the chaos, is that people are coming more from their heart, because those structures, those confinements, those things that have been so out of control around us, we've not been able to engage with them, right? The shops, the going here, the rushing there, the doing that, even schools, or even going to work. When that all falls away, what do we have? We have ourselves, and we have each other, right? So my wish, my hope is that we will take that new sensation of ourselves, new experience of our world and ourselves in our world as we move forward, and always bring ourselves to whatever it is that we're doing, and not segment ourselves.
There's a wonderful poem by David White called The True Love, and this is just the first part of it. It goes, there's a faith in loving fiercely the one who is rightfully yours. There's a faith in loving fiercely the life that is rightfully yours, especially if you never could deserve this loving and beckoning hand held out to you this way. I'm speaking now of faith and the testament of loneliness and what you feel you are worthy of in this world. For me, that goes right to the heart of it. Realizing our worthiness and really having that faith to seize our life, to seize what we love, and come back to it rather than get up in our heads and get lost in all the stuff we've done before.
Yeah, and that's so beautiful, Dusty, and that piece about being able to receive, be able to see. We were talking earlier about the gifts that we have to offer, and what I found is it's oftentimes easier to give. It's easier to be generous than it is to receive, and learning to receive is really that yin, that feminine, that's a higher challenge, which I think that's another gift that this experience of the pandemic has brought, is people are allowing themselves more often to receive. There's more of an invitation to receive. There's more of an invitation to pick up the phone and call and not see it be seen as bad manners because you're not just texting. There's more of that connection of in real life connection. So thank you for sharing that beautiful poem.
I want to come to two things from the chat box. First of all, Sherry said, which I just got such a kick out of, I can't wait to see the drive-in theaters come back. Family times when we sat together in our car or in the back of a pickup to watch a movie on a giant screen. I think some of the great things that we had or did 30 to 50 years ago could come back. And I'm going to get to Christine wrote something. Let me quickly say, Fran said, I knew this medical student who was about to go into his first set of rounds with his patients. He was wearing a shirt and a tie, and what I suggested to him was to make sure that because he is wearing a tie, that to be mindful to not separate his head from his heart and to be more in his heart with his patients. Beautiful.
Good.
Christine bless you, says, we are to ask Dusty about taking his young kids to work with him on business trips. And as we're closing up, I'm going to ask you, Dusty, if you want to share that with us.
Yeah, I read Iron John, Robert Bly's book about families, about life, about men, and how the kids were separated. The fathers or the mothers go off to work, and then they come home, and there's no connection. And so I decided to start taking each of my kids with me on different business trips. And so I would rotate them around. I have 3. So at least once a year, all 3 of them, we get to go on a business trip. And they got to interact with the clients. They got to observe. They got to see. And it was really something that opened them up. And it was always delightful watching how they interacted. I did a speech. I also do keynote speeches. And I was doing a speech to a group of about 5,000 women, Women in Cable Television Network, the WIC. And my youngest, who was 6 at the time, Chamberlain, was sitting in the front row. And I was talking. I said something about my wife. And I said, now, no one in here will share that. And she piped up the top of her lungs and says, I will. And it was the best part of the speech. Everybody broke out laughing because it put them in their hearts. Aww. And the kids traveling with me, it was some of the most special memories I have about the deep connections.
That's such a testimony to who you are, Dusty. That's just absolutely beautiful. Can you imagine if all of our business people did that? That would just be amazing. I'd like to share, Allison wrote something here also to contribute. I'm completely in the unexpected and change of normal at the moment. I had hoped to build my business to reach out to the world outside, and instead, between several weeks of illness and recovery, then shifting in a more caretaker role in newly conglomeration of multi-generational nucleus family living situation. Wow. That's a shift for me, and the surprising peace and joy of co-parenting again with my son and granddaughter and taking care of my 82-year-old stepfather. What an experience.
Blessings. Thank you.
Wow.
Beautiful.
Wow. So isn't that just juicy? So wonderful.
We have 5 minutes to wrap up.
Right. So in coming to a close, I just would like to perhaps the participants, if there's something that you want to write in a closing statement in the chat box, just something that you're taking away from today. And if I can ask each one of our masterminders, just in one sentence, something that you're taking away from today or would like to share with the group as we leave. And we'll go the other way. Let me see, who did I start with? Dusty, let's start with you.
I would go to what Alexis shared about the heart as a bridge. I love that being able to cross that bridge. And it's not just a bridge here, it's also a bridge there. And it's a bridge out into the natural world. So for me, that was a beautiful image. And I loved the song that Teresa sang that tied back to that bridging. So for me, that was the gift I'm taking away. And that commitment, it seems like everybody has to really come more and more from their hearts.
Thanks, Dusty. Teresa?
Yeah, very similar. I felt really moved by, Alexis, your words and that sense of the connection of the heart, and that David White poem, and this thinking about how the heart has 4 rooms, has 4 empty rooms, 4 chambers, and thinking about how that connects with Franny, you and Sherry talking about the quiet, the pause, the silence, and how it's in those spaces that we're able to receive as well as give. The heart receives and it gives out, and how it all kind of ties together. So that sense of connection and the heart is what I'm taking with me today.
Luke?
Well, the heart is the big theme. I see the connection on the resilience as I spoke about the example of how we're getting better, and it's all heart-based, how we can help each other. So the heart is huge. And I see a group of people in front of me here with incredible hearts. And this is so encouraging. As we see some negative, I think there's so much more positive, and it all comes from the heart.
Thank you. Gary?
I think the contribution that Alexis made was excellent today. It reminds me of the word centeredness and balance. It's heart and mind and body. And just to give you a golf example, if you go and playing in a competitive round of golf and you're angry, you ain't going to play your best golf. And you know, so the idea of breathing, moving energy around your body, getting balanced and centered is the word. And I see, I can't remember, I think somebody said something here, Alison, maybe about heart math. I'd recommend that. It's in fact, I'm going to go and dig my books out and have another read. It's getting that centeredness and balance, which allows you to have your receptors open to finding your gift if you feel you haven't yet, and listening to what others are saying about what your gift may be without you having preconceived ideas.
Gary, so I'd like to share, some folks in the group have shared. So Franny says, thank you so much for everyone sharing their hearts and being in the moment together as we live across our world. Blessings, namaste. Thank you, Franny. Allison said, upbeat, joy, expansion, heart focus. What's my added value? Reminder of heart math and book titles. For all of this and so much more, thank yous. Thanks to you. Thank you, Allison. Sherry, these 3 weeks with you all, can hear her saying that, have been highlights of my days. Thank you for sharing. You are all so thoughtful, sincere, and your passions are revealed. Thank you, Sherry. And Christine says, bravo to you 5 for giving birth to this webinar series and carrying it through, even when only a few are showing up. Your combined hearts are touching the world in a wonderful way. Thank you, Christine. Thank you. So for me, what I'm taking away is the universality of our hearts. I mean, we have people from all over the world literally here. And I think I could say for the most part, y'all don't know each other. Y'all don't know each other. And here we are absolutely knowing one another and appreciating one another. I mean, that is just amazing. And here, right here, is the gift of this crisis. And we have certainly claimed it today.
Yeah.
So I thank you. I thank you all for contributing. I thank you for receiving. I thank you for being here. And, oh, wait, Seth wrote, thank you all for receiving that message so deeply. And thank you for allowing me to join in. That must be from Alexa, and participate in such a beautiful, profound way today. What a gift. That's from Alexis. So thank you all. Thank you.
Leeza,
Thank you.
thank
Next
you for
week.
being such a great facilitator, Leeza. Thank you.
Thank you for doing this today.
My joy. So we'll see you again next week, and I'll send out an invitation for that. And yeah, I look forward to having you all again. We all do.
Yeah.
Be well. Take care.
Be well.
Bye-bye. Bye.